Hey there, everyone. I'm Fionuala, and today I'm in the succulent section of Cottage Gardens of Petaluma. I'm going to remind you that we're in Zone 9B over here in Petaluma, which is probably the best climate in the world. But right now it's a little bit hot, so that inspired me to talk about succulents today, which is why I'm in the succulent area at the nursery. So what I want to focus on today is actually putting together a succulent container. Partly because one of my customers the other day was already putting together containers to give as gifts this coming holiday season. I was super impressed with that. The forethought was amazing. So yeah, it inspired me to think this is what we are going to talk about today. So I'm in a really good part of the nursery with so many different succulents to choose from that I had to kind of narrow it down to what's the color scheme, how big is the container, what am I going to do today? So I've been having some fun. I decided to go with blues. Blue is one of my favorite colors. It's peaceful, it's inspiring, looks really good in a succulent, looks really good in a pot. So do you want to see what I found out? Let's go. Okay, I had a lot of fun and I found some beautiful succulents in the blue tones mostly, a little bit of pink here and there. And I also found a super cool blue pot that I'm going to make my arrangement in. Now, obviously all of these succulents aren't going to fit all in one pot, but I figured this is a palette that I'm going to play with, and when I'm potting it up, I'll edit even further. So yeah, let's go. Okay, so I have picked out my palette. I've picked out a whole bunch of plants. I went way overboard, but I think it's better to have a lot to choose from rather than run back and forth to the store or the succulent department in this case. I'd rather have everything in front of me and then play with it and see what happens. So I've got my succulents, I've got a beautiful pot, I've got my gloves, which I may or may not wear because I generally don't because I lose them so much, but it would be smart to wear your gloves. I've got a few trusty tools to help me, and I've got my succulents, and I've got my soil cactus mix. Let me talk about that. Okay, so something that succulents really like is well-drained soil. And the container that you choose for them also needs to drain really well. So what you want is one really big, decent hole. Hope you can see this. Or a few smaller ones. And ensure good drainage. Do not put your succulent pot when you're finished somewhere where it can't drain. Raise it up a teeny bit if you can. And yeah, like I said, succulent soil, cactus soil, same thing. It's formulated specially for cacti and succulents, and it's our go-to every single time. So yeah, we're going to start with this beautiful pot with excellent drainage, and then all of my succulents. You want a nice layer of succulent soil at the bottom of the pot. Now, a lot of people think that succulents want full-on baking sun all the time, but actually we've discovered here in Zone 9B that most of them actually prefer a little bit of afternoon shade. So think about the location you're going to put your succulent pot in while you're making it. So you want a couple of inches in the bottom of the pot that you're going to rest your succulents on. And then you're going to start designing. One thing that succulents all have in common is their ability to withstand drought conditions. That is going for a little while without water, which is a very handy thing living here in Northern California, because we don't really get rain from April to October. Making succulents a very attractive sort of a plant to grow. All right, I'm using this as my test to make sure I've got enough soil in the bottom of my container. And actually it needs a little bit more, so. Okay, I think I got it. Mound it up a teeny bit too because it does settle after a while when you water it for the first time. So yeah, succulents have thick, fleshy leaves, or in the case of this sempervirens, spidery looking leaves, very fuzzy. They have the ability to withstand periods of drought or times that they're not getting too much water. So it's a really, really great gift to give somebody who may not be that great at staying up with the watering. And really now what I'm getting down to is the design. And as I showed you, I chose this one as the center. It's got this beautiful blue-green color with the little frilly pink edges that are super pretty. It's called Coral Reef, Echeveria Coral Reef, and I just love it. So that's the centerpiece of the whole arrangement. Then I've picked out other ones that look super cute and highlighted. So we're going to put those in with it. Let's just mock it up for a second and make sure it works. It really does. I had brought this Semp up just to see maybe I was going to use it. Decided against that one just because A, it's too crowded, and B, this cutie really looks good against the coral reef foliage. It contrasts enough that just makes me very happy. And that's what it's all about. If you're giving a gift of something beautiful you've created yourself, I think it should make you happy first. It should be hard to part with. So that's where I'm going with this one. So look at this. It looks quite amazing. I love the way it's looking so far. Then I just need to pick what's going to trail over the edges. Is it going to be this little crassula? I think so. Or maybe I need this little blue sedum. Or maybe I need both. So I'm choosing these particular succulents with a couple of things in mind. One is the color, like I've talked about before. The pink of the crassula brings out the pink in the coral reef. But the other one, the other consideration to take into account is, do they have similar needs? Do they have similar growing conditions? Every single one of these really would like a little bit of afternoon shade. None of them want to be drowned in water. They can all go the same length of time without water, and they look very good together, basically. So none of them really want more shade than another one. None of them want more sun than another one. And here we go. I think I'm going to pop this in somehow because I really like the way that one looks. But I'll keep on with my design. What I'm doing here actually fits in really well with that whole concept of spiller, filler, and thriller. Personally, I'm finding them all quite thrilling. But this is the spiller, this is the thriller, and this little filler is actually quite thrilling too. So I'm going to keep going and enjoy this process. One thing about potting up anything is that it can get quite messy. Some people wear aprons. I just dress accordingly. I wear flowery clothes. I move quickly so nobody can actually see if it's dirty. Oh my goodness, this is coming together really nicely. I love the way this is coming together. So something else about succulents is they actually quite like to be crowded. So I'm not hurting them by jamming them all in together like this. They're going to grow together beautifully, look stunning by the time I give it away as a gift. And the recipient is going to be thrilled to bits when they see just how lovely this is. Okay. Another thing is succulents are quite shallow rooted. You can see as I'm unpotting this one, it's pretty shallow rooted. So a shallow pot is totally acceptable for a succulent. They don't need anything much deeper. And you can run into trouble if you plant them into a deep pot because we tend to overwater. The water ends up down in the bottom of the pot. It gets soggy. You can end up with a fungal problem. And that's no fun. So you really want to think like a succulent when you're planting a succulent garden, even if it's in a container like this one. So I think I've got my design in place. I think it's here, and it is completely ready to get potted up exactly as I want it. One thing you need to do when you're planting anything, not just succulents, is plant those little plants at the level that they were at in the pot. I don't know if you can see this, but I don't want to bury this any deeper than that little soil line right there. You're going to want to be really careful about that because you can end up, when you're watering it, you can end up kind of covering up the crown of the plant, which is another thing that causes rot and failure of your little succulent. And we're really aiming for success here. Some succulents are a little more forgiving than others when you do that. Something like this that has a long stem, but any of the rosette-y kind of ones, the echeverias, the semps, plants like that, they really want to be planted at the depth they were in their pot. So keep that in mind when you're creating your own container. When you're getting the succulent out of the pot, just be really careful. It's another reason I don't use gloves. I want to feel that I am not damaging the poor little plant when I'm taking it out of its pot. So it's easier, you get a lot more dexterity, a lot more ability to feel what you're doing. Not that there's anything wrong with gloves or using gloves. I mean, my nails really don't look great half the time because I don't use gloves, but that's okay. I'm a gardener. So a lot of people think they should put rocks in the bottom of their pots or their containers. Again, anything that you're potting up into container, a lot of people do like to put rocks in the bottom of them. I really don't like doing that because in my experience, quite often, the older the pot, the longer you've been watering it, the little drainage hole or the big drainage hole in the bottom can fill up with those rocks, ends up blocking that drainage hole, which in the case of succulents can actually be fatal. You really never want to drown your succulents, ever, because what they want is excellent drainage, not a lot of water, and you know, you have a blocked drainage hole, this ends up being water plants rather than anything else. This is not what a succulent is. Okay, I think I'm almost there at the point where I'm going to start filling in between my succulents with a little more cactus soil. Cactus and succulent soil is what I should be saying, but to save time, I just call it cactus soil. But it's a really good cactus and succulent potting mix. It's ideal. A couple of rejects that didn't make it. They're super gorgeous, and they're just going to have to go into a different container because it didn't quite fit with the color scheme. But I'm going to create something else around those ones, and that's going to be fun. All right. So I have tools. I've got this. I've got a nice little scoop, which is handy for the rocks. But honestly, quite often a spoon, a tablespoon, is almost the best way to go. It's a little smaller than the scoop or most other tools that you can find out there in the store. And we all have tablespoons. And if the gap between your succulents is extra small, go grab yourself a teaspoon. So now I'm filling everything in between my succulents, tamping it down a little bit as I go. And I'm going to make sure it's nice and solid in there so that when I do come to water it, that I don't end up having everything uneven, and so that everything's at that same level that I told you before is so important. So yeah, this is really coming together very nicely. I really like the combination. It's going to be hard to part with, but like I said, that's the best kind of gift to give. I know exactly who I'm making this for. So I'm just using my finger to squish the soil down between the little succulents, just to make sure every one of them is making contact. You want the roots to make contact with the soil. You want to just make sure that's happening and there's not too much air around them. Because even though they like really good drainage and a well-aerated soil, they don't want to be sitting in the air with their roots just hanging out there. So press it down with your fingers, get it nice and tight, good root contact with the soil all around it. Now this does look very tightly packed, but believe me, the succulents do not mind it at all. They may grow together, which is actually what I'm looking for here. I want them to look like it's been like here for quite some time, and this is just this beautiful, natural, gorgeous artwork that I didn't just think up this morning. But it is so much fun to design with succulents. The textures, the colors, it's a huge, huge bunch of plants, and like I said, so much fun to work with. You've got wavy leaves like this, you've got tight little foliage like this, you've got spillers like this, and powder blue. I mean, just look, it really is fun. If I was painting this, I don't think I could do a better job. But every one of them really does want at least 4 to 6 hours of sun and a little bit of afternoon shade. So if you give them full-on morning sun, and as long as they're shaded before the hottest sun of the afternoon hits where you put them, they're going to be really, really happy. The other thing I did when I was choosing this is they all have very, very similar frost tolerance. So I probably would, after all of this work, make sure I get out there and protect them. If it does get very frosty, if the temperatures dip below, 28, but they've all got similar needs, which is a thing to consider. A lot of succulents actually can go down to 0. So if you're making a succulent garden in a container for somebody who lives in a different zone where it gets very cold, there's actually plenty to choose from there too. You don't get to use the exact same palette, but believe me, there's so many to choose from. You're going to find something that really works for you. As for their care afterwards, again, I chose similar needs, and depending on where you're growing this particular succulent container arrangement, you're kind of going to let its happiness dictate how often you water. Here in Petaluma, if I had it on the deck at my house, I think I would water it with a little shower every week to 10 days, depending on the temperatures. If there was a heat wave predicted, I might go out there and check on it and just make sure it's okay. But look at these fleshy leaves. They store water. They're made to store water. They're made to be able to withstand periods of neglectful gardening. And yeah, I'm getting there. Okay, so we are getting there. I think I've got everything where I want it to be. The soil is making contact with all of the roots. I'm just going to double check with my fingers, make sure everybody is in. And then you kind of give it a little tip, hit the pot a bit, get the soil all settled in. And then I'm going to give it a little water. Now you can water fairly deeply when you're starting because you're going to want to make sure those roots go down into the pot. So I'm going to give it some water. Make sure every single succulent is watered. And this will also tell you too if the soil isn't quite making root contact. You're going to watch and pay attention to where that water is going. And make sure every succulent has water. And everybody's getting a little bit. It's a warm day today, so I am actually going to give this whole container perhaps a little bit more water than I might do if I was potting it up on a colder day, because they might be feeling a little bit of shock. But I'm happy with this, and it's looking good. One final thing that you don't actually have to do, but it looks really great, is if you finish it off with a very small layer of mulch. And what I love to use when we're talking about succulents are stones, little tiny pebbles. And this is where my little scoop comes in handy. Really love this pea gravel, and because these are all in the blue tones, I chose one that is also in the blue tones. Complements everything really nicely. And the other great thing about it is it absorbs the heat and holds onto the heat in the winter months, giving your succulents a little more happiness and joy on a cold day. But it does not hold the moisture in. When we talk about mulch for other plants and other containers, quite often we're using it to suppress weeds and to conserve moisture. This rock mulch does not conserve moisture, which is what we're aiming for when you're growing succulents. You are just making them pretty and highlighting the succulents even more than their little companions are. Every one of the ones that I picked here kind of show off their companions really nicely. And as you can see, they're kind of in the same, the rock mulch is in the same color tone as the succulents. Okay, it's looking pretty good. I'm going to give it one more little bit of water. First, I'm going to check that every side looks good. Ooh, I missed a bit. Right between here. If I can see the soil, I really want to get those pebbles in there because I don't want to be seeing dirt. Okay. One more little bit of water for a couple of reasons. Just get it down to the roots, but also to clean the stones up a little bit so that they're clean and beautiful, and so that it looks pretty right from the get-go. Something I'm noticing here is there's some soil on some of the leaves of my succulents, and some little rocks too, so I'm just going to go over it with a brush when I go find myself a brush. Just make sure it's perfect. Okay, here we have it. I think we're done. I think they're going to be thrilled with their gift. I sure hope so. And it was a ton of fun putting it together. I like it. It's going to be hard to give away, but I will. So yeah, I hope you learned just how much fun putting together a succulent container can be. It's creative, it's colorful, it's definitely an art form, and it's actually far easier than you would think. Hopefully those tips were really helpful. As always, if you have any further questions, make sure you drop me a comment. I'm happy to answer them. Or just come on in, because we are really happy to help you. We have succulent containers made up here already, just in case you're in a big hurry and you're running off and you need an instant gift. But we're really happy to help you put together your own container that has your own personal touch to it. So yeah, that was fun for me. I hope it was just as much fun for you. If you like this video, be sure to hit that like button and follow along for more. You can find me here at Cottage Gardens of Petaluma. You can check out my Facebook page, my Instagram page. Drop me an email if you need to at info@cottagegardensofpet.com. But honestly, the best thing you can do is to come on in. See you next time.